This is Steve Downs, the voice of Master Chief, Spartan 117. Welcome to Quality Time, the KO Koala Entertainment Podcast. Anthony and Skylar will take it from here. Master Chief, out.
Hello and welcome to Koalatea Time, the KO Koala Entertainment Podcast. I'm Skylar Sokol.
I am Anthony Nicolosi.
And today we have a super special guest. Anthony, you want to give us the rundown?
Well, actually, Dr. Celia Hodent, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, that's the easy way out. So yeah, hi everyone. Super happy to be with you today. Thanks for having me. I have a PhD in psychology, and I have been working in UX in games for the past 13 years now. I've worked at Ubisoft, I worked at LucasArts, I worked at Epic Games, and I've been an independent consultant for the past, four years now. So yeah, I've worked on a few games, like including a small game called Fortnite.
Yeah, super tiny. Never heard of it.
Yeah, and so I work in UX to make sure that the players have fun and games are more engaging and more usable. That's my job.
Now, we're going to call Celia. She said it was okay. We made
okay.
sure first. Celia is like is not like she is a superstar to our entire studio. For those who are listening, when we are software engineers by trade. We work
okay.
we work full-time jobs as software engineers, and so when we were thinking about we've subsidized development costs, if you will, and living costs on our game with our salaries from our full-time jobs. So we're doing this part-time, and finding the optimal return on investment has always been a focus of our studio. And so early on, the studio was founded in 2018. At the beginning of 2017, all that year, I just kind of re-educated myself on Unreal Engine. I had done a little bit of it in college with Unreal 3 and Unreal 4 had come out, learned some business stuff, tax stuff, and just like inhaled GDC videos on the free YouTube account. And one of top 3 of my favorite GDC talks was the gamer's brain, how neuroscience impacts game design. I might have forgotten a chunk of that title. It was fascinating. I've always personally found psychology like interesting, and I always think maybe in a different world I would have went that way or something. But you're subsequently after the talk, I found out you wrote a whole book surrounding those topics. Inhaled that. I think it still stands as the most highlighted Kindle book I have.
You have weird pastime. I don't know. I didn't know we could inhale such things.
Yes, I eat my books.
No judging, just
the memory process, ingraining it into my memory works a lot better when you eat it.
Okay. Whatever you say.
So, in one of the huge insights from your book, outside of the fascinating, and I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit about this during the course of this podcast, but the fascinating aspects of like the human brain, perception, attention, memory, all this stuff, was the emphasis on playtesting. And whatever Agora ends up becoming, it will be, I don't even hesitate to say, 100 times better, thanks to your insights around playtesting and us subsequently making that a huge focus of our development cycle.
That's awesome. Thank you.
No, it's great. We took a ton of inspiration.
It's just amazing that you think that can have this impact, and it's just you playtesting and listening to your players' feedback, and that's going to help you out and do things faster, and it's great. I mean, it's awesome. I can't wait to see that, actually.
Yeah, the difference in like the first build of our game with the build we have now is like astounding, and we thought the first build was pretty good, and now going back to it, we're like, it is not good.
That's the thing with playtesting. It fucking hurts because you're like, yeah, we're so happy with our baby, and then you let people play it, and people are like, what the hell, and they don't get it, and you're like, oh shit.
Yes.
But then,
Well-
so it's hard. It's really hard to watch. But then you fix the things, and afterwards you do another test, and then players get it now, and they have more fun. And this is really rewarding, and you're like, yeah. And so that's what playtesting does. It hurts, but for the long game, and then makes it better.
You touched on one aspect there that I think was super enlightening for us was it's what's it called, the curse of knowledge, right? Like, you're used to your game, you play your game all the time, you maybe sort of love it more than you should in places, right, in some ways, and then you give it to people and you get really good feedback around really how they're perceiving things differently than you hoped they would, that you thought they would, and how that also affects it quite frankly, over the course of the first three play tests we had, there was an evolution of mechanics, of sandbox items and everything, because we didn't the play tests and the UX processes we tried to implement to the best we could helped us to see that our design intent was not coming through, or was like not fully realized, is maybe the way I would say it.
Yeah.
You agree, Skylar?
Yeah, definitely. I think seeing the way people played the game and being able to observe that and hear what they were thinking about, especially coming out of like us designing the levels and having like very specific things in mind, we just realized like that their intentions could be so different than what we thought, or what they really wanted to be doing in the game was potentially very different from what we thought they would want to be doing. And that caused a lot of design thoughts about new mechanics and ways to give them the opportunity to do the things they were finding really fun.
Really a cool feedback, because not only it helped you fix problems, but it made you more creative.
Yeah, definitely. Like, one of our core mechanics now, what is only in the game because of our first playtest, and then me being on a plane for 3.5 hours and suddenly like being inspired to think of it, and then I like landed and I called Anthony. I was like, Anthony, we have to put this in the game. This solves all of our problems.
That's really cool, because I have a lot. So you have still a lot of misconceptions around UX, and one of the big ones, especially from creative people, they're saying like, well, UX techniques and processes is just going to kill creativity, which to me is completely like, what? But it's great to have like just like your feedback, like just showing that it actually helped you be creative and thought of things that you maybe would not have thought off the bat.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, if you guys are okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I work a lot with AAA studios or big studios or middle-sized studios, and some of them already have a big playtest lab where they can do all their tests and easily recruit more easily than for indie devs. Recruit people and do testings. I do have a lot of indie devs that are interested into playtesting, but they feel that it's really hard to put together, and it's a lot of effort, and they don't necessarily have all the means. How was it for you? How did you organize that? How did you manage to do it? Was it very costly? Did you feel that it was a great return of investment? Can you just tell me a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So our first plan, we were inspired also by, what was that other book we used?
Yeah,
Game
I was going
Thinking?
to say, if I can jump in on game, I just want to highlight
There's
game
another
thinking
book?
here. No, yes, because I think the core, the place this starts, the way our methodology started was first thinking about. You hear that static, Skylar? That's coming over. I think it's
Yeah.
maybe.
I hear it.
Maybe it was Skylar's mic. That happened one time. Anyway, so yeah, there's another book by Amy Jo Kim called Game Thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know this book?
Hello. Is this better?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, that sounds better.
Yeah.
In that book, one of the things she does, another great.
Wait, while we're
super
fixing
highlighted-
technical issues, Celia, can you turn your camera off and back on really quick? Your audio is slightly delayed from your video.
Oh, good. Okay.
Boom.
This better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Fixed. Perfect. All right, we're doing it live. All right. Anyway, playtesting. How do we do it, Anthony? In our innovative, cutting-edge technology laboratory that we paid millions of dollars for.
Definitely not. I tried to put that in the budget. Skylar would not.
I nixed it.
accept
I said,
it.
Anthony,
No.
let's use your living room. And
So-
one of his children only pooped on the floor one time during one playtest.
Oh my god.
Oh, man.
Okay.
So as you can see, a very, very expensive, elaborate process we did here. The first key insight coming from Game Thinking book from Amy Jo Kim was she breaks down the market into 5 different segments.
Mhm.
I am going to simplify them into like 4. There's the first category of people who are, the way that we always describe it, they're actively aware they want a game like Agora that we're making. Then there's this other group that's like with some awareness brought to the game and everything. They don't know they want it, but they do want it and they would play it. Then there's the people who like all their friends or everybody else has to be playing and love it for them to try it. And then there's the people who need to have all their friends playing it, everyone loves it, and it's on sale, like so we tried, what we did is we created
That first
surveys.
group, by the way, is coined super fans in her book. And so we decided we wanted to survey these super fans, and so we built.
We wanted to try and find a group of super fans.
Yeah.
So tapping into, actually, I don't want to say this incorrectly. You had a section in Gamer's Brain about surveys.
Yeah, we use that a lot. Yes.
We
Surveys
heavily
are part
referenced-
of the methodology that we use in user research. Yeah.
Yes.
So we heavily referenced your section on that, and we created surveys that we thought were our best attempt at trying to evaluate if a person was a super fan.
I'll tell you now, I would have wrote that survey completely differently knowing what I do now, but at the beginning it worked. It worked okay. And we learned a lot from seeing whether people actually were super fans or not once they played the game. We were actually pretty good. I think almost everyone we brought on for the very first playtest was I think maybe 90% of them were actually good super fans. So
what type of question did you ask to figure?
So some of the things we asked, one of the questions, I think one of the key questions was, there were some games that were sort of similar to our game. It's like a physics action FPS, we've said, right? And so Portal, for example, was a good example of a game we thought had a lot of similarities. So we asked people their thoughts on Portal. We didn't just ask if they liked it. We asked them to talk about whether they liked it and what they liked about it, and tried to take, if they liked the specific mechanics about it, how that would affect it. We had them rate a bunch of different things on a scale of 1 to 10. I can't remember what they are. Do you still have that survey?
Yeah, we do have it. Guarantee you, I don't lose any of that stuff. But we also asked them some questions about their gaming habits, because we felt like there was going to be some correlation with the target demographic and their gaming habits. Hours, how many hours they played a week, what kinds of games they played, if I remember correctly. I would say
here it is. Let me just go to our UX section in our OneNote.
Ooh,
exciting!
So we asked them. Look at all these notes. Wow.
No, I was just curious. How did you? Because it's not easy to build a survey. That's the reason why I'm saying this, and that's also the thing that is complicated for indie developers that don't have a lab or don't have UX researchers, because it's actually pretty hard to put together a survey without asking leading questions and to really get the insights that you need. Now, it's not easy.
I'll tell you that in game thinking, Amy Jo Kim actually goes through a very practical step-by-step process for designing these super fan screeners, including examples and stuff.
That's true. Yep.
And so that really helped us in crafting this survey.
That's great.
It was very practical, really easy to understand way to get this survey working. And so she asked in each section there's specific questions you need to answer, and based on those questions you formulate your survey questions and stuff like that. So I think that helped us with the superfan screener. So we did that. We got our group of superfans. I think we only surveyed our friends. We only surveyed people we
personal
knew directly
networks.
who were
that
who were
love
local.
you.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily that love us, but they do love us, but more just that we're local and would be free, right? and easy to access.
Yeah, the security. I'm of the very paranoid legal type. So, making
Yeah.
sure we could kind of maintain access of the build and, not have any security. We really like our game idea and we think it's interesting and novel. It honestly, and
Anthony's
we
we're
didn't want somebody.
scared we'll show it and that Epic will make a
Somebody will
better
steal it.
version before we release it.
Yeah, Epic's gonna make a Fortnite version.
Damn.
Oh, not Epic, but any company, But anyway,
Yeah.
so we got this initial group of people, and we invited them over to Anthony's house. We just did it. We decided we wanted to do in-person observed playtests so we could just get like the best possible experience, and we were hoping that because they were our friends, it would reduce the like amount of like nervousness and sort of like altered behavior that comes from in-person observation. Because I know with a random person that could be a lot more risky, but with our friends we figured we could just be like, hey, we're comfortable with you literally saying this game sucks, we don't care, like please say it, and they would be receptive to that. And that's generally what we experienced. So then the next steps we did, just to give the final group, is that we wrote a survey for the playtest, right? We wrote questions we wanted to ask during play. We wrote down things we wanted to track during play, like while we were note taking, while observing. We basically had one person doing like narration and guidance for the playtest for the stuff we wrote in advance that they should say, and hopefully nothing else. And then one person taking notes and observing like the player behavior. And then we would ask some questions during gameplay, but the big questions came afterwards in like the post interview. That we wrote, that were just all like, we went through every level again and talked about each individual level. We talked about people's favorite things, how they felt about various mechanics and all of that. And I will say, I was thinking earlier today about like what the most challenging part of the initial playtests were, and it was definitely trying to keep things non-leading and non-biased. Like it was so hard to watch people struggle with like one specific level that was maybe a little too hard and definitely didn't have enough like onboarding to justify that level existing for a new player, and not want to like literally like do the level for them so they could finish it, because like that level alone took people like 30 minutes, and nowadays in the playtest it takes people like 6 minutes.
So that's an improvement. So
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that's the thing that's awesome. Like you were able to find a way to make it work. Of course, when you can't have a lab, you can't easily recruit people, but you can still get people that you know. I would recommend, if you get people that you know, to try to ask them very specific, objective questions. Less about how you feel and more about what is this, what is that, what is your objective here. What are you supposed to do? What are you trying to figure out, or trying to gain, or whatever? Because this is going to be less biased. That's the only issue when you.
No,
do
that's
that with
really
people
interesting.
Even if they do say that they want to be honest, deep down inside they don't want to hurt you. So even if they truly trying to help out, they're also going to make more efforts to figure stuff out.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have a lot of friends who are obsessive video gamers like us, and so they have very strong critical opinions about video games, so that helped a little bit, I think. But yeah, I totally see what you're saying, and I think we definitely noticed things like that in how we worded those initial questions and how we've changed them since then, because our questions have definitely become way more specific with further playtests as we've found like what would be more useful.
Yeah, it's more, it's well, I mean, it's not that the others are not useful, but they can be heavily biased, especially, anytime you ask someone an opinion, you typically want to have a big sample that is representative of the players that are going to play your game. And that's harder to do than, get a few friends here and there that can just play your game. So the smaller the sample and the less representative, the more you want to stay, as objective as you can, and the less you want to ask subjective questions and stuff about feelings and opinions.
Yeah, that's really that's true.
Here's the other thing too, even from our experience, and I'm curious as to what you think here, but when you ask subjective, open-ended questions, it's more data for you to go through and try like extract value from.
That's true.
That's also true.
I forgot how long it took me to synthesize our first playtest feedback. That was such a long exercise because we had so much subjective questions. I'm now thinking back to it, and it was a lot of work.
It's a lot, and it's also a lot for researchers that are trained to do so. So for someone who's not trained to do so, it can be really, really hard. So that's the reason why I recommend smaller teams. to really try to stay straight to the point, to have precise hypotheses before you playtest. Like you think about, okay, what are we trying to accomplish with this build? What do we want players to understand? And try to measure things. So like measure how long it takes them to go through the level, for example. That's a great example because for you, if you play through it, maybe it takes 5 minutes, but for them it's 30 minutes. That's a good insight to have. And
Yes.
this is more objective than just asking them, did you find it easy to go through? That sort of questions is just more complicated. Like questions like, did you find the interface intuitive? Did you find it easy? It's still good to ask them their opinion, but you want to back it up with more objective measures.
Yeah.
Now, Celia, this is like, let me actually, I was going to say something. Let me back up and say one thing first. When we did, because I think it might bring value here for those who are listening, we're going to try and propagate this as wide as possible so that other indie game devs can hopefully benefit.
Inhale all of this.
And eat.
For the record, I've never heard Anthony use that word in that way ever before. That's like new as of this podcast. Just so Anthony does this all the time, though. Just like,
but when
inhaled anything before.
Especially during COVID.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bad time to be breathing so heavily.
After the first playtest, as Skylar was saying, we had a lot of data, partly because of the open-ended questions and parts, like definitely our process contributed, but we had a lot of data and we had to go through a lot of it. And there was a lot of, just critical, feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we did have a conversation because when we initially started this project, we didn't really have the experience to justify this estimate, but we were trying to do something that was within scope of a year part-time. Mm-hmm. Here we are 3 years later, but what
that's not unusual.
So it would seem,
3 years later with one additional employee too. Like
one thing we talked about after that first play test, and you've made a point about this in your talks before, about it felt like we had two ways to go. We could either sort of just ignore this feedback and just keep making the game we're making so that we can get something out by some time, or we can like really seriously integrate playtests and the incorporating the feedback and working around the feedback into our process, which is going to impact the delivery, the deadline. At least for us, it was. It's going to mean more time. We've never made a game before. We couldn't scope out, like we can't estimate how long it's going to take for us to work through a design problem that the play tests like brought up, right? So you've talked about how UX in a lot of ways feels like an investment for a studio to make. And I think we have really, we've really lived that. It does feel like an investment, but I just want to back up what you say as well, where you say, it's not about whether you should do UX or not. It's about whether it's not about whether you can afford to do UX. It's about whether you can afford to not do it.
Yeah.
It's a stupid little phrase, but so UX is actually not a thing. It's not a process. It's a way to think about what you're doing. It's about shifting from your own perspective as a developer or whatever you're creating to adopt the perspective of the end user and make sure that they get it and the product is, or the game is usable for them and they're having fun because it's a game. So in our case, on top of it, people need to have fun. So it's all about shifting, but shifting is hard. And so there's a lot of processes, there's a lot of techniques, a lot of tools that we use to get that working, because as you were rightfully saying at the beginning, you have the curse of knowledge. So it's really hard to understand why don't people get it, because for you it's so obvious because you made it, that it's actually hard to anticipate these problems. And so the whole point is trying to have a strategy, and it's better to do a test and to know what works and what doesn't work so that you can ask yourself, okay, what do we do? you can actually say, okay, we know it's not great, but let's push through. It's our first game. Let's go through the whole thing, and then we'll learn from that. And then we know that it's not going to be great, but it's going to help us do the version 2, and then it's going to be better. That's an option. Or you can say, well, actually, we think we have something that could be much better if we spend more time trying to fix the problems that we saw in playtest. And then you can define what the priority or the things that you absolutely want to fix, and the things that you're like, yeah, we know this is not going to be great, but it's not, should not be a priority 0. So it's all about establishing your strategy, having all the information and the insights that you need to make enlightened decisions. This is what I call having a UX strategy. Now, there's different tools. You can do playtesting. You can apply learnings, teachings from human factor psychology and human-computer interaction. There are guidelines you can follow. There's a lot of things you can do. But at the end of the day, it's better to make decisions and to think about, okay, what is the plan, knowing what we know about the game and how players, understand the game right now. Is this what we want or not?
Yeah, that's really cool. It gives me a lot of thoughts about, like, I don't know if you're familiar with like agile development methodologies and stuff like that. We use agile for the studio and at work, obviously, but it reminds me a lot of that, and of like constantly reevaluating whether things are going the direction you're going, and not being afraid to just like be like, this is wrong, how can we make it better? It doesn't matter like why it's wrong, it's just wrong and we should make it better. And I think we've definitely we think about that all the time, for sure. We're constantly reevaluating like our perspectives and our priorities on various, aspects of the game, UX or otherwise.
Yeah, as long as you give enough time for you to tinker around,
right?
Because it's a creative process making a game, and so sometimes when you look at agile methodologies or lean methodologies, sometimes it's too fast. You have like 2 weeks and you have to have another sprint, and it's sometimes not enough time to figure stuff out and to tinker around and to prototype and to try stuff out. So as long as you accommodate for having enough time to prototype and to trying to figure stuff out with players, that again, at the end of the day, you will avoid wasting time, and you increase your chances for your game to be more successful and make more money in the end, so that you can make more games.
Yes. Ironically, actually, at our full-time jobs, we work on a lot of like research-based development projects. A lot of the work we do is like solutions development for like research problems. So the Agile we use at work actually ended up being a very loose form of Agile as well. That sort of allowed for this level of creativity. So I think that actually came into our inspiration for how we used Agile in the studio as well, because you're definitely right. Like, if you just follow structure, full Agile, it's not going to have room for like the creative and honestly like impossible to estimate design and like, problems that come up in game development.
In any creative process.
Yeah, totally.
Innovative, if you try to be innovative, you always have to tinker stuff around and to do a lot of prototypes and throw them away and try again. I mean, so that takes a while. But then, Agile, that's great for production, and then once you have more or less where you want to go, then yes, bang bang bang, you can figure stuff out. But there are some key moments where we have to be very careful that if you want to really have a good design thinking process that is part of UX, and be able to prototype and try stuff out, you need to accommodate for that.
Yeah, cool.
One, for what it's worth, again, if this maybe helps others who end up listening to this, we one thing that I think we loosely try and do is, as we set release milestones for the game, they're always tied to a playtest. So we kind of think like from playtest to playtest, if that makes sense, from a feature perspective. So we're going to implement these features. Honestly, after this last playtest, it's turned into, we're going to implement this content. The features feel done, like the mechanics and stuff feel good. It's just about making content now and making sure it's contributing well to the mastery path, etc. So we think of it from a playtest to playtest perspective. Okay, where's the next playtest happening? What's content's going to be in there? when's the next one happening, what content's going to be in there.
Right.
At least for us, that's like, I don't know, from my perspective, and I wanted to ask you about this. It seems like I would want a UX person like making my whole game. It seems so valuable, like the perspectives are so like enlightening so many times. And in let me I don't want to say this incorrectly. In his 2019 Games You Are keynote, Randy Pagulayan, I'm so sorry, Randy, if I said his name wrong, but he made this point of saying, UX has gone from this thing in his career from when in the early 2000s they're like, hey, the UX person would be like, what's the target demographic for your game? What's the target profile for a user? And the guy's like, who are you, asshole? Like that's early 2000s to now. He's saying that when Microsoft buys new studios and they say, hey, what resources do you need? The thing they're most requesting is UX and user research stuff.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of progress in terms of especially user research has gone a long way in tech and in video games more specifically. Now, UX maturity, so of course, user research is core to UX process, but it's not just that. It's also, like I said, it's a mindset. So everybody needs to understand this is a mindset. It's not just about, oh yeah, we'll just test it at some point later on. You have to think about a lot of stuff before, and you have to also be ready for implementing and figure stuff out after you receive the reports from the playtest. But yeah, no, Microsoft did a lot to improve the maturity in terms of UX in the game industry and in tech in general. I mean, they put together a lot of innovative research methodologies like the RITE methodology, the rapid iterative testing and evaluation. That's used a lot. Especially to try stuff out, and you do a prototype or you implement something, you have one person testing it, you see what are the problems that they're having, and then you tweak it right off the bat. Okay, they're having no usability issue with this, let's just fix it right now before you having the second person testing it, so that that this is fixed and you can see what is the next problem you can fix. So that's very useful. And a lot of people are using that, and they have a big lab, and it's really great what they've been doing and how it's getting a lot of people interested and into having a lab and adding all these tools and techniques to improve games. Now we still have a long way to go to make UX a mindset and a culture, I feel. Because there's still a lot of stuff missing, sadly.
So, on that note, there's not of course saying generally, like
I know all
everything.
as basic information, just so you know.
I've read the gamer's brain. Everything. I know you do. So there's the Nielsen Norman, right? Is the name of the group that.
It's Norman Nielsen, but yeah, it's good
Norman
enough.
Nielsen. I know NN Group. There is their
Group,
YouTube. Yeah. They have the stages of UX maturity in organizations.
Mm-hmm.
I won't pretend to really know those well, but generally speaking, there's 1 to 6. 1 is like you don't even know, you don't even care. There's nothing. 6 is that it's sort of pervasive and as a mindset through the entire organization, and it's a priority.
Yeah.
If you had to generally, based off of your experience, say, where do you feel like the game industry is at right now as average UX maturity level? Are they all at ones? And don't be afraid to say it. I will defend you against the Tim Sweeneys and the Phil Spencers. But it sounds like, for example, you just said Microsoft sounds like they're taking considerable steps towards trying to improve. I don't know if necessarily it's their goal to have level 6, but
honestly, I don't. So actually, I've recently been writing a new book about UX in general, not UX in games, and it's called What UX Really Is, and I talk about UX maturity. And during while writing this book, and so I mentioned the maturity stages, I was thinking, do I know a company that is at the highest level of maturity? I'm not sure actually. So a lot of people would say, some companies that were there and not there anymore. Like Apple comes back oftentimes when we say this because Donald Norman was VP at Apple for some time. There was a lot of work around not just how people would experience the product, but also the whole ecosystem, which is what the UX is all about. That's why Donald Norman coined that term to think about the whole user journey with the product, but also with the brand, with the company. And so when you think about Apple, how they marketed their brand, think different. How they created their Apple stores, the fact that unboxing the product it's also a great experience. Everything is super slick. So the whole thing in the computer, you boot it the first time, it's saying hello to you. All the sort of things. It's really thought through, and that sounds much more like UX is a culture, like everybody from marketing to consumer, customer service, to designers, to engineers. That it seems that there's an alignment that everyone, they just want to offer the best experience possible, and this is what a UX culture sounds like. But sometimes you reach the apex and then you start to rest on your laurels, and this is when you maybe slide back, and to me, I would add that to be at the highest level of maturity, you have to make ethics a priority. So it's all about make sure your product is inclusive, that it's going to be accessible, that your team is inclusive, and that you make sure that you respect your users, that there's no way that you're taking advantage of them. So it could be anything from business model to make sure that your users and your customers have good privacy. So there's a lot of talks around privacy with Apple products. Really. So that, to me, that should be part of having a UX culture, and then make sure to offer the best experience possible to your users. And users are humans, and it means all of your users, and it also means make sure that everything is respected, from accessibility to privacy to all of these things.
Yeah. That's really interesting.
So to answer your question, I don't know.
You're
There's a
giving
lot.
the two.
No. So there are companies that are still at one. There are studios that we've been making games for, I don't know, like 20 years. Who the fuck needs a psychologist?
Right.
So they still have discussions like this. It's like, what the hell is this? And we're making art, or it's creativity. So why do we need science? It's against creativity. So you still hear that. But now a lot of companies now at least do playtests. So they're at least, at 3, they do playtest regularly, but now it's not necessarily really embedded in the pipeline. So it's more like an afterthought oftentimes. So like, oh yes, we did a playtest, or we will do a playtest once we're ready, but it's not really something that is regular, that is thought of ahead of time, that is accommodated for the whole team. It's not, really strategized.
Yeah.
And it seems that they were still like halfway through, which is normal. I mean, it takes a while to have good maturity.
It's interesting that you say, like, because they're doing play tests, right, it gives them like a 3. I had an experience with the game I'm not going to mention the name of, but I was in the beta of, and they had a relatively transparent playtest process that was run through their Discord, and I just saw they did a lot of playtests, and I participated in them, and I gave feedback, and you could see what the top feedback is, and I could see them not integrating any of the feedback they were getting into their game, and it sort of just felt very arbitrary. Like, why are they doing playtests if they're not even taking in the integrating the feedback?
To be fair, you don't necessarily want to. So I don't know the games. I have no idea what you're talking about. To be fair, you don't necessarily do what people tell you.
No, totally
you listen to the feedback. But ultimately, it's your game, and every game is just different, and you have different constraints, you have different objectives. So sometimes you're not necessarily gonna listen, and also perception is different from reality. So I can give you an example. Sometimes you have players like in a game, it is multiplayer, and you have range shooters, and you also have melee players. So in that case, typically when you sprint backwards, you're not as fast as if you spring forward, because if it was the case, then the melee character could never catch up on a range character that would just like shoot them to death. So by design, we make sure that sprinting backwards is slower. But now sometimes you have people like complaining during playtests or during beta, and like, oh my god, this is really too slow. It's terrible. We need to make it better. If you just listen to what players say, you can actually screw your balance.
Right.
If you do that.
Yeah.
But what you could do is actually make the animation of switching backwards faster. That's going to change the perception that people have, but it's not changing really the design itself. The velocity doesn't change.
That is so crazy.
Yeah, no, it's not crazy at all. This is magic.
Yeah,
we do that in movies.
magic.
We do that in video games.
Yeah.
You know, that's the reason why, like Mario, when he's sprinting, and they have the little arms like on the side, because you feel it's going faster. And it's all about the perception of it sometimes.
Yeah.
So it's important to keep the balance of everything. And so sometimes you don't necessarily you listen to the complaints, but you try to figure out where it's coming from so that you can really fix the right problem.
Now, I'll tell you, in my defense, for this specific game, once it released, it was Fall Guys is the game. I don't really care about saying it. I talk about it all the time and how I think that they had major design problems, so I don't care. But basically, it released and it was extremely popular, and then their popularity died down very rapidly. And since then, almost all of the changes they've made to the game have been the things that I saw at the top of the feedback during the beta playtests, and all the changes they've made that have improved the game and made it more popular. So that's the only reason I feel confident saying that, like, it seemed like they were being ignorant to valuable feedback. But your point totally stands.
We are both right. We're talking about different stuff, but I just want to make sure that this is clear, because you don't necessarily.
Totally.
We make an investigation or try to figure out why people feel the way they feel, and if it's not by design, this is not what we want them to feel. Sometimes the solution is not obvious. And Darnoman says that a lot. It's finding solutions is not that hard, and you can find solutions. It's finding the right solution to the right problem that you have. That is difficult.
I'll tell you, we've definitely experienced that in our playtesting, where we have playtesters who, especially I think because they're our friends, get very excited about sharing with us like ideas they have, like improvements to the game, mechanics we could add, things like that. And very frequently what we end up listening to out of that is, something they would want to do in the game is this, but then we end up implementing a completely different mechanic that potentially gives them the opportunity to do the thing they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. This is also a misconception about UX or methodologies like this, to try to figure out what people feel. Like, people say, I don't want to be dictated what I need to do, but this is not what we do. It's just like, we figure out, we know how people feel. If this is not what we want them to feel, then we try to figure out why, and we find our own solutions to these problems. It's completely we don't listen. We don't implement the feedback that people tell us to implement. We listen, and then we try to figure out, and depending on what we want to accomplish, we find solutions.
So based off of some of your talks I've listened to before, from a concrete roles perspective, in a studio, you'll have, a larger studio, you'll have a game designer, then you'll have a UX designer that works with the game designer. So if it's fresh in my mind, you might, I prepared, ahead of time a little bit. The way you described it, game designers are like the ones who are figuring out the systems and what systems the why, then the UX designers kind of figuring out how to get to that design intent. Is that accurate?
This is what we can observe in some studios. Is not always the case. You have studios where the game designer is also the UX designer, sure. Especially like the smaller the studio. But in a big studio, like even an Epic, on a teams at Fortnite, you had the game designers, and then you had UX designers that were working with the game designers. For example, the game designer is going to say, it's a game about crafting, so we're going to have players are going to gather materials and ingredients, and they're going to have to craft stuff. That would be the minimum amount of different materials that they would use to craft something. So it could be, let's say, at minimum, they wouldn't use 2 ingredients to grab something. At maximum, it could be 5. I'm just
Yep.
saying this out of my mind. And they could need from 1 material each to, I don't know, 10. So they said the minimum, maximum, the things that they need, especially system designers. It's complex. So they define all of this. And then the UX designer is like, okay, how are we conveying all this for the player? And there can be a lot of back and forth. Sometimes the UX designer is going to say, well, this is actually pretty complex. Can we simplify? Or because sometimes, the game designers, system designers, they want to make sure the game is deep, and that's fair enough. But sometimes to make it deep, they're actually making it more complex,
Right.
which is not
Sure.
what you want. You want it to be deep. So that's I talk about that a lot.
Right.
It's very abstract, but it's the difference between depth and complexity. You
Right.
want a game that has depth. You don't want a game that has too much complexity, and then people are just like, what the, they don't remember stuff because then it becomes very niche. Now there's some people like that, but it's reducing a lot your audience. So the UX designers sometimes go back and forth, and they can challenge the game designer. There's a lot of dialogue. It's not that they're just doing what the game designers are saying, but they are more focused on how it's going to look like, what sort of information players going to need, what sort of interaction they're going to do with the system to craft, and what do they need to see, and how does all that's going to unfold. So that's more of their focus. But again, it depends a lot on the studios, but that would be a more typical way.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's interesting. So, Celia, you've had a huge breadth of experience because you have not only worked on games. You've worked on, right? You started with educational games and educational software. You also helped work on the engine, like for an Epic and Unreal Engine, right?
Yep.
Are there some like core memory, perception, and intent? I don't want to if those are the core you're about to say, I don't want to steal it. They're coming to mind. Are there some core principles that sort of UX principles that really hold across all of these different sort of experiences and design?
Yes, absolutely. So an experience is what happens in people's minds. We can't design an experience. We design an environment, and as people interact with this environment, they have a specific experience. Now, I know, right? So now we design for an experience. So I know it's just playing with words here, but it's actually pretty important to keep that in mind, because this is when we can understand, this is why we need to shift perspective, because what I design is not necessarily what people are experiencing. And so because an experience is what happens in people's minds, we need to understand a little bit the limitations and the characteristics of mental processes such as perception, attention, memory. And UX has its foundations in human factor psychology and human-computer interaction, which are applications of cognitive science. And cognitive science is the science, the science of mental processes. And so this is really the basic knowledge. And stuff like perception is subjective. We don't perceive the reality as it is. Perception is a construction of the mind. That's the reason why people from different cultures, or depending on the context that you see a specific stimulus, you're not going to perceive the same thing. It's something that people have a hard time, remembering. That's why on TikTok, now I was getting old, but it was maybe like a year ago, like people were like mind blown because there was a video and there were 2 words, and depending on which word you were reading, you didn't hear the same sound, and people were like,
yeah.
It always makes me laugh when I see something like that, because I'm like, perception is subjective. So it depends on the context. It depends on what you hear. It depends on what you expect. It depends on who you are. It depends on many, many things. We are not perceiving the reality as it is. It is a construction, a subjective construction of the brain. So if we know that, anything you are going to create, whether it is a video game, a tool, Unreal Engine, whatever it is, you have to make sure that whatever you're creating, whether it is an icon, animation, a sound effect, you want to make sure that what people perceive is what you intended to convey.
Yeah.
That's why we test.
Right.
Attention is very our attentional resources are very scarce. We have the feeling that we can multitask, and we're not actually good at it. So this is the reason why you sometimes are like, you are in a hurry and then you need to go and like, shit, where are my keys? And you're like, I can't find my keys, and I can't remember where you put your keys, and you find them in a weird location, like, why are my keys here? And that's the reason why this happens to us is because we try to process too many things at the same time, and so now we don't remember what we did with our keys, or sometimes we start a new thing and then we forget that we had something on the burner, and it's like, or worse, you're driving and so the phone, and then you can like really, you can sometimes go into accidents. So sometimes it can be really bad. It can have fatal errors, and sometimes it's just it's not too bad, or you just thought that I don't know, you wanted
you hit the
drink
wrong
juice.
button in the video game or whatever, and you accidentally die.
Exactly. Or you just like want to shake your juice before you're drinking it, and you didn't notice that it was not completely
or that.
stuff like that
Yes.
happens all the time, and that's
Yes.
because we don't pay attention well enough, and we're not good at multitasking. And memory is fallible, so we're not good at remembering things, and what we do remember, it's not perfect because we don't take pictures of our surroundings and then we store it somewhere, and then when we have to remember it, it's just like bring it back to consciousness. The way we encoded it's not the way it works. So memory is a reconstruction, so every time we remember something, we can potentially alter this memory. And people don't realize how bad we are, because we're like, we went to the moon, we're going to Mars, and just, of course, our brain is so good. And no, we are able to do all these things because we actually have a very strong process to be able to gain knowledge and to build technology. Without these processes, there would be no science. Science is really all about standardizing a process and making sure that what we see is actually really what's happening and not just an artifact. And so that's the reason why we actually need multiple scientists to replicate research to just make sure that this is really what's happening. And that takes years, and we go back and forth. That's why it's complicated to figure stuff out. Or in technology, that's UX. We need to figure out how to do things and to find ways to prevent people from making fatal errors, just like during World War II when people were crashing their planes, not because they were stupid, but just because the humans, they're going to make errors. And so we need to design having this in mind so that we can have better technology and better science. And this is how we got there. Not just because we're like, ooh, we humans are so good.
We're just. Have you ever read that Terry Bison Aliens Who Find Humans and they're just meat? It's like the poem is like it's as if aliens find Earth and they're like, there's sentient beings down there, but you're not going to believe this. They're just made out of meat. He's like, how do they talk to each other? Surely they have electronic devices. Like, nope. They have meat. They flap meat at each other.
I think it's called They're Made of Meat. I think
they're made of meat. Yes, it's a hilarious.
They're made out of meat. Yeah. Okay, so I'm super curious, and this is something I was thinking about earlier that I'm really curious about. So for you, someone who thinks like so deeply about experiences and creating them, and creating environments that lead to experiences. Sorry, don't want to misspeak after that.
Think about experiences. That's a correct sentence.
And who focuses so much on the science of like UX and all this. I'm really curious, and this may not be the question you expect me to ask, but what like kinds of games do you enjoy playing, and like what are your like favorite
I get this question all the freaking time.
I'm sure because someone who literally thinks about games all and like these specific parts of games all the time.
But that's the reason why people are curious.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. That's why I'm curious. Yeah, exactly.
No,
exactly.
Actually, so I play a lot of games. And a lot of time is for work. I love to be honest with you. And so a lot of times when I play just for fun, I like something not necessarily simple, but where I can just like shoot people.
Yeah, that's me.
No.
Same.
or not, try to figure out all the different systems and how to manage my inventory.
Just like
So-
get into the flow easy and then enjoy the game, right?
So not necessarily getting in the flow easy, but the more I'm getting old also, and the less time I have, the harder it is for me to get into RPGs, for example. Because it's just like big, and it's going to take time to really get into it and to really enjoy the game. You have to learn all the systems. So sometimes I do it, but most of the time I don't. I know I don't have a lot of time to play, so I'm gonna play like a small game or an indie game because I love to try to support indie developers. So I'm just gonna download a game, and sometimes I'm very late on the games I want to play and try out. So I catch up. So like recently I played 12 Minutes and Psychonauts 2. I'm super excited about Psychonauts 2 because it's also like nostalgia from the first one. And also I love short narrative games sometimes, like Inside. I talk a lot about this game because that's one of the game that really I really found interesting. Then games like Hellblade that I really enjoyed back in the day. So yeah, and then I just like love Overwatch and just shooting people in the face.
That's fair. Yeah,
I'm curious,
Limbo
you
was. Oh,
kinda-
go ahead, Anthony. Yeah.
No, you kind of said it with RPGs. Is there, and maybe you don't want to say it, but I'm curious as if there's like any studio, their UX is so bad, you are not playing it. You're like, I can't even play these guys' games because I'm just mad 15 minutes in.
No,
Okay.
never. It's never a feeling that I have. So sometimes I'm like, this studio has got a lot of shit that I heard around harassment, and so then I would like, I'm not supporting that, and I'm
Gotcha.
torn because I know that the developers who worked on a specific game, they're super excited to get their game out. And I know, it's not because there's a problem in the studio that everybody in the studio have a problem. So I get it. But then when it's a big studio, it's getting hard for me to support that sort of thing, especially since it's getting really loud and it's getting really embarrassing. So it's more something like that, or a studio that I don't know. I know that they treat their people like shit, and the people who worked on the game didn't get any of the money that just the head of the studio got. So this is when I would be like, I don't know if I want to support them. But it's
Gotcha.
never because UX is.
No, but that ties into UX, right? Like you were saying that earlier.
Yeah,
it's like
it's about the ethics, right?
of
Yeah.
your organization.
But UX is
contribute-
everything.
Right.
Yes.
UX is life, man. So it's always going to be, there's always going to be good stuff in terms of UX and less good stuff in terms of UX, as long as the people who make the games are respected and the people who play the games are respected, and they're not really thought as just a cow that needs milking. Or whale that is milking, to use their some terms. Then it's okay. It's okay. I understand there's a lot of concern. I get it. It's hard to make games. I totally understand that it's hard to put the investment to doing playtest and that people are not using into UX. I get that, and I don't care as long as it's made with the heart and there's not a lot of people get exploited in the process.
Yeah.
And actually, Can I ask you about ethical games real quick? Because this is something that you started, right? Along with some other members of the industry. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is? I told Instagram, the way I put it, you are a champion against predatory microtransactions. And the entire 13 to 18-year-old male segment in our community in unison all became your fans immediately.
Yeah, so I don't know if I champion anything, actually. I need to put much more effort into that. There's so many things to do. But the idea was just to start having a conversation. And it's just difficult to have an abstract conversation saying, hey, we need more ethics. And sometimes I don't want people who make mobile free-to-play games thinking that it's just like where everybody's looking at them. Because you have a lot of small studios that are making great mobile games, and yes, they're free to play, and they're it's hard to monetize. To be honest, it's really hard. So I find it a bit too easy to just point fingers at just like free to play. So the idea was, okay, so what is the problem? What is what are ethical practices and what are practices that are not ethical, and how we can try to figure stuff out and draw a line in the sand and say, okay, this is too much. And it's actually pretty hard when you start looking into these things. So yes, there are monetization, but there's also, you have games that are gonna punish disengagement. So yes, if you come back playing, you're gonna have a reward. Most people find that okay, but then if you don't come back, maybe you're gonna miss out on something super cool, and you're never gonna get that reward again. This starts to sound like punishing disengagement, and this is not necessarily around monetization. It's more about engagement. It's a bit of a problem as well. You want players to come back because they're having fun and they're excited about the game. You don't necessarily want to force them to come back. Otherwise, they know they're going to miss out on something cool. And maybe today they didn't want to play, or they're sick, or some of their family members are sick, or they don't have Wi-Fi, or I don't know. It could be anything. And so I found that a bit predatory to force people to come back to play on a specific day to get a specific thing. And that's also part of the issue. And it's not just free-to-play games, and it's also very hard. The games are hard to make, and so I get it, and it's a complicated discussion to have. There's no easy solutions, and that's the reason why I thought, okay, we need to start really talking about this. And the problem is that there's also, in the media and the public, you have a big moral panic around games.
Yeah.
And you have people saying...
You have for like 20 years. It's just like never ends, right?
And man, it's more than 20 years.
Yeah, I guess that's true, yeah.
More like 30.
Yeah, I guess like more like 30 years. Yeah.
And it's just like, it's never ending. And like, can you get over this now?
Right. I mean, talking about China just like a week ago, right?
Yeah, so that's part of this. And so the whole thing about gaming addiction, where you have actually a lot of scholars that don't agree with this. So there's a lot of problems, and you have people like use the term addiction like very lightly, and now you have people that treat game developers as how you say drug dealers.
Sure.
And so, yes, there are ethical practices that are problematic, and you do have game developers that don't really care. They're just here for the money, just like any industry, to be honest, right. Because the game industry now is the biggest one in the entertainment industry. So, yes, you're going to have people that just don't care. They just want to make money, sure. But most game developers that I know, they're passionate about their craft. And so what are we going to do to say, no, this is an art form. It's part of a culture. And just like any industry, you're going to have people just going to exploit others and just going to try to make the most money as possible. And then you have artists, and you have like people like they try to do the best they can with what they can, and there's a lot of constraints. So if we want to have a nuanced conversation, we actually need to have it inside the game industry, which is not happening that much today.
What if review scores is a conversation we've had before? This is so way easier said than done, but I feel like review scores were somehow tied to the ethics of the organization making the game.
Right. Like, or there was like a second number that was like the ethical score, and then the game score.
That's a bigger distraction, because like now you're talking about capitalism and the fact that
right.
Like shareholders that just care about the money, they don't care about ethic practices, and right now it's not rewarding in a society.
Yeah, those organizations are not going to implement the transparent practices necessary to have a review score like that.
Unless the players make them.
Right, unless the value proposition becomes like, unless you do this, your game's not selling, right?
That's the thing. So far this is how things work.
Right. Well, especially in like this kind of capitalist economy, right? Like that's the way you do it.
We get Skylar going on capitalism. We'll be here till 2 in the morning.
Don't get me started on anti-capitalist sentiments. I have way too many of them to talk about in one podcast.
I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's not like everything is to throw away in the being about capitalism. It's just creating big issues, because we have finite resources, and so the whole point is to always make more money. It's not shareholders that just don't want to have the company making the same amount of money as before,
right.
or making benefits. it just has to always get better year
Bigger.
after year.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
that
Yep.
sounds weird.
That does sound
Where
weird.
does
It sounds like
stop?
as long as you're like meeting the inflation standards, your company should be happy
Yeah.
making the same amount of money, right? And it probably wouldn't be that big a deal.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
No,
no.
totally agreed. Anyway, I'm just curious. So you got your degree in PhD in psychology, right? And were you working on UX even when you were getting your PhD, or were you more just like in a psychology perspective then?
I was like full on. I thought I would become a researcher. So my PhD is more specifically cognitive psychology. So like I was saying earlier, cognitive science is at the foundation of UX. So human factor psychology and human computer interaction is applied cognitive science. So I studied cognitive science and more specifically cognitive psychology and more specifically cognitive development, how children develop knowledge. So cognition means knowledge, and how cognitive science is all about how we acquire knowledge and maintain knowledge and remember stuff and reason and language. All of that is cognitive science. So my specialty is how children build their cognition, how they develop.
That's interesting.
Okay,
So
that's
this
cool.
is how I started, and tried to figure out.
That seems like it
when-
translates well into starting to look at game UX for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I don't really work with children anymore.
Right.
But initially, this is more like how children, when do they get a real concept of number, for example, and is the language that they speak have an influence on this developments? That was my thesis about comparing English-speaking kids with French-speaking kids, because French, and see how it's impacting their acquisition of the concept of number. And from
Interesting.
that, this is when I started to work in.
Was there a correlation?
Yeah,
That's
I'm curious
interesting.
too. I want to know what was the answer.
Oh boy, it's complicated. So the theory was, okay, babies,
I'm
infants,
interested. Yeah.
they are able to, when we work on child development, we use games and toys and stuff. So you have a researcher, she's very well known, she's called Karen Wynn, and she worked on infants, and she put like Mickeys in a theater. Like she showed one Mickey to the baby, and then she's hiding this Mickey, so you don't see it anymore, it's behind the screen. And then you have another Mickey that's going behind the screen, and then she puts the screen down, and you can either have two Mickeys or you can have one or three. I'm tired. and she found out that infants were looking longer. So it's all about fixation times. Because the theory is if they look at stuff longer, it means that they're surprised.
Right.
And turns out they look longer when it's 1 + 1 = 1 or 3 than when it's 1 + 1 = 2.
So they had some concept of the sum making
Yeah.
sense, right? And was it more common in English-speaking children or French?
No, so this is pre-verbal infants. They don't
Right.
think at that stage.
Right.
But the idea is what happens to this capacity as they start speaking. And
I
so
see.
my thesis director, he did the same study with verbal kids, so more around 2-3 years old, with French kids, and he found out that 1 + 1 = 3 didn't seem to be that surprising to them. And so it was like, what the hell is going on? So this is how we actually do research. Like we find something and then we have to confirm, is this just like an artifact? Sometimes it's just because it's sometimes small samples, so we need to replicate and other people are not going to find this. And so what I did when I started my thesis is try to find out, is this just French kids? Or is it also English kids? Is there an influence of language here? And the idea was that maybe French kids don't express their surprise as much when it's 1 + 1 = 3, because in French we have the same word for 1 to 3 and a sum. So like singular plural, in French it's un, and the same, it's un des, a sum, and 1 to 3, 1, 2, 3. And so the theory that maybe as they learn how to speak, there's like a confusion between counting and singular plural.
Right.
So when you add something, you have plural. should be great. So that's what I was trying to figure out.
What about my scientific conclusion that the French are just more, they love the excitement of
More is better.
yeah, and yeah, it's consistent with my experience. Americans are way more boring than the Europeans I've met.
Come on.
It's just-
So here's the thing,
Just kidding.
science is not about opinions. So you can
That's
put
right.
down an hypothesis and then you test it out.
Yeah, I can
This is how we
already
figure
see
stuff out.
somebody shredding my opinion paper. Last question before a couple of fun little wrap-up questions for you,
Okay.
Celia, because we have a lot of young people in our community right now. They make up a large size of our demographic, and they often talk about like maybe being interested in psychology or being interested in game design too, for sure. What made you think that you wanted to pursue that like as a career? Like if they're thinking about it, do you have any recommendations on how to test out that intuition in that direction to see if it's something? I don't know.
That's extremely hard for me to answer this question. The reason why is because I
Everyone's so
grew
different.
up in France. In France, higher education is free. I had no idea if psychology would be the thing for me, but you know what? Because I did not pay for my higher education, I just tried it out while I was playing music with my rock band. But I was like, yeah, psychology sounds cool. There's a lot of things that I can do with it. There's a lot of careers that you can get out of it. But I did not know much about psychology when I started. I only knew like Freud and stuff like that. And then I realized that there's actually a lot more scientific. So initially, I'm always been fascinated by science, by medicine. So I was really into biology and stuff like that. And I found out that psychology had this whole aspect to it. You have psychophysiology and psychophysics and so there's a lot of science in psychology. And I was super into that. And that, to me, that was a revelation, and how people reason. And once you study psychology, you find out that you can apply it to pretty much anything.
Yeah.
This is how I ended up in video games. I would never have thought, I played games a lot when I was a kid. I would never have thought that I would end up working in the game industry. And it's all because, psychology is touching everything. So
Okay.
Yeah, that's really
Maybe
interesting.
Maybe somebody hears that and it sparks.
I just would hope that in the US, higher education would be free.
Yeah,
It's
I hope the
fucked
same
up.
thing.
This is
Celia,
so
we're on the same
unfair.
page politically. I can see. I think we share a lot of opinions.
It is so unfair.
It
And
is.
It's also like healthcare. Like, let's not even talk about it.
Yeah.
But I realized how lucky I was to grow up in a place where I could just like have a higher education. I didn't pay anything for my PhD, and when I say that to my American friends, they want to hate me. They want to kill me. Like, what? Like, no, I paid like 150 euros per year just
Damn.
for healthcare. That was for healthcare.
That's crazy.
So yes, of course, you have to pay for, you have to place to live and etc. I'm not saying that students in France, it's great and everybody is able to have a higher education. There's still some inequity
Right.
there,
There's still
definitely.
cost barriers. Yeah.
But I mean, here it's so heartbreaking
Yeah.
to see how difficult it is to have a higher education, and once you have it, you have a huge student loan that you have to pay off. It's just so hard. It's really hard.
Yeah, it was a revelation to me when I was at a cybersecurity conference, and there was a PhD student there from it was an academic cybersecurity conference basically where PhD students came and presented their research, and there was a PhD student there from Sweden or something, and he told me about how PhD students in Sweden are paid as good of salaries as engineers in Sweden, and basically Sweden wants to encourage PhD students
The next level.
right. That they're actually paid salaries that are comparable to full-time jobs so that
Wow.
they can be there doing research. And I was like, that would be amazing. Here people are losing their ability to live so that they can get PhDs.
You're incentivized for shaking your butt on TikTok.
That's it. Anyway, moving into our even more, I guess more off topic questions. This is my favorite questions to ask people, and it's dumb. And maybe you psychologically can tell me why I think this is such a valuable determination of someone's quality as a person. But I always like to know people's favorite food and favorite animal. So, what's your favorite food and what's your favorite animal?
So favorite food as in favorite raw food or dish?
No, this is I know favorite food is a complicated question because of that, right? Like, I would say it can be either a genre of food or it could be a dish. Whatever speaks to you in the moment.
God, I love chocolate. I can tell you that.
All right,
okay.
I'm very simple. I love simple things. I'm excited by eating a carrot. It's just.
I love carrots.
Yeah, but carrots are cool. It's awesome, and I love bananas as well. So I'm not super complicated in terms of food. I like simple things. If you ask me what I like to drink, that's a different story.
Well, you can answer that too.
I'm
we
excited
want
about
to
red
know that
wine,
one.
but
Yeah.
that's not.
Red? Did you say red wine?
Yeah.
Red wine?
That's the thing. I'm still French, so I still have that thing. So that's, oftentimes I don't care about what restaurants are we going to as soon as we get a good one. So, yeah. But I love
Well,
chocolate.
I don't know what's happening with my mic today, but those are good answers. I'm curious. Do you have a favorite type of red wine?
So I love Bordeaux. I love Malbec.
I'm a Malbec fan.
Yeah, I would love to go to Argentina. Not just
Anthony's family's from
Argentina. My mom was born in Argentina, and then
I just want to go to Mendoza. It's just like one of the things. Hopefully, after the pandemic, I'll be able to visit. There's a bunch of game developers here, so I was like, "Yeah, pick me." So I can go drink the wine.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. I just recently made a friend from Puerto Rico who's a game developer, and he said that, and I've learned that there's a lot of game developers in South America as well. Like he said, a lot of the people who are working on his current game he started a studio are all Brazilian animators and stuff. And
in Brazil, in Chile, in Colombia also, you have a bunch of developers there. In Argentina.
Very cool.
So I don't know everyone there, but so I've been to Brazil. I went to Brazil when was that? Not long before the pandemic, I think. So that was exciting. That's the thing that I love about my current job. Now that I'm a consultant, before the pandemic, I was traveling a lot, and that was just amazing to go meet the developers in some amazing places, like in South America or in New Zealand and Australia and in Lebanon and in Iran.
Wow.
So I was super, super lucky to be able to meet the people in some amazing places. So I hope that someday we'll be able to do that again.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's awesome.
Cool.
All right,
That's
Anthony, is it time for the
okay.
big question?
This is the big question, Celia.
Hey, wait a minute! You see, memory's
No,
horrible. I didn't answer about the animal.
Yeah.
Oh, the animal. Oh no. That's actually the question I'm more interested in than the food too, and I forgot. You can blame my ADHD for that, though. I have even more fallible memory than most.
Yeah. So among wild animal, I really love cheetahs. I found them really fascinating. I love a lot of animals. I love sharks. I scuba dive, so whenever I see a shark, I'm super excited. But then the common animals, I'm more of a dog person.
Okay. My favorite underwater animal is definitely an octopus. That I saw one when I was snorkeling one time, and it was amazing.
Octopi are awesome.
Indeed, yes.
I love them. They're hard to see though. I saw one recently, hiding. That's exciting, but I never saw one really with all the tentacles.
Yeah, I was snorkeling in Barbados actually on a cruise or something.
Look at you.
Not a common activity for me. Not common. This was a one-time thing. I wish I had the means to do that more. But yeah, and I saw and I told the guide, and he was like, "No one ever sees octopi here. You're super lucky." So yeah.
They're super smart. I can't eat octopus.
I actually stopped eating octopus recently because of it. It used to be my favorite sushi, and then I was like, no, I'm done. I can't do that.
They're too smart.
Yeah.
It's just like pork. I can't eat pork. It's just like poor animals. They're so close to humans.
Yeah, and so intelligent.
Yep.
Well, I wonder if that will tie into this last question. So, okay, Celia, if you have to make a choice between these two food options, the other one that you don't choose ceases to exist never existed before. You never got to try it before either. Would you choose burgers or pizza?
To get rid of?
To get or to keep, either way, whichever way you want to answer.
I'm not super fan of pizza, actually.
Oh, okay. So you choose burgers.
I'm more of a burger person, but also the thing is, I'm trying to cut down on meat because it's not good, and we love animals.
Well, and that's where I thought, based off of the conversation, where
I know, I'm not consistent.
That's okay. It's okay.
Humans are very full of contradictions.
No.
So I'm looking forward to the moment where we'll be able to process meat in labs. That would be the best day ever.
Hey,
when we
if
can
it
eat
tastes
steaks
just
without.
Growing up, my family's from Argentina. There's literally, at least there was 10 years ago, there was like 4 cows to every person in Argentina.
Oh,
the
wow.
whole Argentinian diet is just meat plus meat plus meat. So, I love meat, and growing up, I've loved it. But I was telling my parents, I was like, honestly, and this is, I don't know, this is maybe sacrilege to the Argentinian person, but in the event that you make something that tastes the same as meat to me, I don't care where it came from. It can come from the lab. It can come from a little ball that Target sells. I don't care. As long as it's really the taste and the experience, if you will, of meat that I really love so much. But have you tried the Impossible Burger stuff?
Yeah, so I still have a digestion issue. I don't know why we're going into places I explain. And that makes me sick.
Oh, that's
unfortunate.
I mean, I can't eat too much of beans and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
So I like the taste, but then my stomach doesn't like it.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I'm reducing meat as much as possible, but because, it's complicated.
Right. No,
I still eat meat sometimes, and I feel bad every time I do it because it's bad. It's bad for the environment. It's not cool for the animals. They suffer, and this is not okay. And I still do it, and I feel bad.
No, I think eating food in modern society is such a contradictory activity and almost impossible to not do in some way that requires so much cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Just have to live with it, and if I think too hard about it, I'm gonna hate all of it.
So there's one of I love science fiction, and one book that I really loved and enjoyed reading when I was a teenager, and it is really great, from a French author that was very much of a socialist. So maybe you enjoy his writing. It's called Barjavel, and one of his stories is called The Ice People, which is a terrible translation. The French title is Dawn of Time, and it's an amazing story, and it's about people coming from I'm not going to explain it all, but they find people in the ice and they try to find out where they come from, and they actually come from the past, but what was much more civilized. People not everyone did have to work, and everybody had a minimum wage, even if you don't want to work. But if you want to have more money, then you can work. It's just it's really interesting. And the woman that they defrost, they actually wants to eat, and they give her a loaf, and she's like, I'm not eating any of that shit. What are you guys doing? You're just barbarians. And then she has a little device, she just taps on it, and it's just producing nutrients, and she just eats that. And I'm like, this is so true. We're so barbarian. We eat other animals, and it's just terrible. It would be great if we could just
had that thought.
synthesize all that food and just get the nutrients.
I'm definitely gonna read this book. I'm looking it up now. I'm gonna find it, and I'm gonna read it.
I really love this book. It's really, and Barjavel. If you like all these stuff, you will like it. But this one would be my favorite.
Okay, very cool. Well, thank you.
The Ice People, which is a very bad translation.
Didn't know we were getting a book recommendation, but I'm very happy we did. I'm currently trying to get through the Brothers Karamazov, so whenever
which is a great book. It's not the same style.
No. But whenever I finish that, then I'll have something new to move on.
Okay, good luck.
Yeah, thanks. It's a slog, but I don't mind if it takes forever. It's just I'm so busy. It's nice to read a book sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. I love reading.
Anyway, I think that I don't. Do you have anything else, Anthony? What do you think?
No, the only last question we usually answer a question from our Quality Time patrons. I think we might not really have a good one this time.
It's really nice for them.
Well,
Your questions are shit.
The most recent question was, will Agora
great user experience, Anthony? Awesome.
Yeah, that was good, Anthony. I'll tell you, Celia, the most recent question was, will Agora have cute anime girls? So those are the kinds of trolley questions we get. So that's the kind of questions we ignore.
A+. So instead, what I was thinking, I asked our Instagram audience earlier today, I said, if you could hear a fun dev story that Celia has about one of the many franchises she worked on, which would it be? And I gave them options, and they chose Assassin's Creed. Do you have any like funny, I don't know, funny thing that happened in the game test?
I'm gonna disappoint everyone. I did not really work on Assassin's Creed production. I work with some of the people who work on the franchise, but I worked more directly on Rainbow Six.
Gotcha. Rainbow Six is fine too. So do you have a Rainbow Six funny story? Or
probably, but man, that was a long time ago.
It's okay. Or any funny story, just a funny UX experience. It doesn't have to be from any specific studio.
For example, you just in one of the talks, there was a clip of them talking about where in Fortnite you guys were teaching them how to build, and so you put them in a square and they had to build this thing. And there's a voice that comes over that what it sounds like is the studio hadn't spent money yet on proper voice actors, so some guy just said something, and it sounded really funny.
That's the sound designers. Sound designers, they have to also oftentimes record their own voices to do the stuff. So yeah, that like a bunch of the voices oftentimes are just recorded by people there.
Does anyone ever record, like, I don't know, a gun sound with their mouth? Like,
right, they like say pew and use it as like a prototype.
In Rainbow Six, and you're like pew pew pew.
Not that I recall, but sometimes like placeholder sounds can just be made just weird stuff, just like with what we have, and then we make it better.
Well, if that one's been a while, we can. One thing I know everyone.
But what is a fun story? Because I should have thought that beforehand. Because man, there's lots of fun. But there's something that's fun for me because there's a lot of background history about it that makes it fun. But it's not easy to explain just 2 seconds. I don't know, man. Like there's sometimes we have playtesters that come over to test the game and they're stoned or they're drunk, and you're like, "What the hell is going on?" So
do you
that's another
ignore
perspective.
Their feedback? Are you guys just like? Do you guys just ignore them? You're like, those guys were high as fuck. We're not listening.
No, you know
to
what?
anything
It's
they
actually
said.
so. This is not. I'm not condoning this. We should not. This is me. Like, you should not drink. Alcohol is always bad. I love red wine, but I should not be drinking that. It's not good for you or anything. But it's actually pretty interesting to have people who playtest a game or anything while they're drunk, because this is when there's no filter.
Right.
And actually so I'm not sure if it's still on YouTube, and you can find YouTube videos of people trying out Windows 8 while drunk, and it's fucking hilarious. Because at some point they're like, what the fuck is this? And this is great. This is actually great insight, because you want people to be able to figure stuff out when they're tired, when they're it's the end of the day, and it should be intuitive, and they should just be able to focus on stuff.
I mean,
but we never do that on purpose. This is not ethical.
That's
I think what I'm taking away is the way to really get good feedback out of our next playtest is to bring a ton of weed.
Yep.
Right before.
I didn't hear any of that. Is that not?
It's legal here. It's granted, since we work for a government contractor, it's not legal for Anthony and I. But in general, in Colorado, it is legal. So we could say that it's okay.
That's really fun. So okay, can I just sneak in one more? You play Star Wars 1313 is kind of like a mythical thing in the game industry.
I know. It's so painful.
Is it is the painful aspect of it that the things that were in works were just so exciting and so promising, or Like, what? I don't know. What's
It's
it like
painful.
to have been on that team, I guess? And
It's painful because of how it happened. It's painful because until last minute we thought it would be okay. Um, and it's just hard. Like for anyone and game developers, most game developers have experienced this. Like a project is canceled or studios closing. It's just painful because it's oftentimes very sudden, and sometimes you feel that it is not. It could have worked, and a lot of people are excited about this, and it's just for me it was really weird because I just got into the US. I initially worked in France and Canada, and I went in the US to work at LucasArts. I grew up with Star Wars, and I was like oh my god, it's just like LucasArts and the Presidio. I'm going to see movies. Like I saw Lena Wachowski, for example. Like there were always people there and just like showing their movies, and it's just like seeing so many exciting people and being in this place like was super mythical for me. And then all of a sudden, it's just it's ending. So it's brutal. It's brutal because I really love working with the people there, and I don't know, it was special. But also it ends up being special in my memory because it didn't went through. So it's hard to tell. It's just like a
right.
relationship that ends too early, or something that you really enjoyed, and it's like vacation. Like it ends too soon, and so you're like, oh, I wish I could live there. But maybe if you live there all the time, you're
You
getting
wouldn't have
tired.
life.
I don't
That's
know.
interesting. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's probably a part of this because it was a tragic. I mean, it's not tragic, and the COVID is tragic, but it was just so hard that it ended it before we could actually do something of it. That it stands like we'll never know. I would have
Right.
felt to just be there, and it was right after, not so long after E3 when everybody loved the demo. So yeah, it makes it hard, and we were also working on a Battlefront reboot that was under NDA, but since it was said by other people, so I can say it. But there was also a Battlefront reboot that was really about to get released, and that was even harder because 1313 it was super exciting, but there was still a long way to go. But the Battlefront reboot, it was like literally like I think it was the day before. Like people would say,
What?
nope. Yeah, no, it was
Wow.
that bad. It was super brutal.
But
Yeah, no, it was, and people were like, just like,
Can we just release this and then
can you
close?
just fucking release it? You're just like,
that man, I don't know. I guess there's something I'm not understanding, about it, and you don't need to explain it, but that makes like no sense. You're one day away. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of money that goes into a release, probably
Right.
for
The
a
maintenance
game
as
like that.
well.
There's
Yeah.
a big retail effort and all that stuff.
It's a multiplayer game, so you have
Yeah.
to maintain servers. It's not just because you release it that it's done. So it's not that sort of games. So yes, there are costs.
Still, yeah.
But it's
that's
so
crazy.
frustrating.
Yeah. Wow.
Especially when after the studio closed, you're like, this could have been the last LucasArts game, and that would have been better than the other last LucasArts game.
Right.
Oh, and it also sounds like that just came out of nowhere. Like, I mean, for it to close the day before, I don't know.
Man, there's stuff
sucks.
that's way over my head. I don't
Right.
understand all the things.
Well,
yeah.
thank you. That's all those. Yeah,
I like that the lighting is really fitting.
We're getting
I
like
know.
that.
Mine
That's
has
so
changed,
very.
too.
Dark now.
From the outside perspective, the game dev industry sometimes seems like such a wild, wild west place that we have our job. I mean, you mentioned the Activision Blizzard stuff that's been happening recently. Skylar and I, when the news broke, I went to Skylar and I'm like, what the fuck is happening?
Stuff in the industry, you made the link by yourself.
Yeah. Well, it's just like,
Yeah,
what
It's
is
hard. It's hard. There's a lot of inclusion problems, to say the least, and the harassment problems. It's a tough industry, and it's not the only
Right.
industry that is tough, to be honest. But it's just, why is this so complicated, and why is this so hard? And we're just here to make games and hopefully have fun making them. And it's just like over complicated, and you have like the bullshit all over the place, and assholes, and you're like, why do we need any of that? Like, we should be fine with that, all that stuff.
Yep.
So it seems it's interesting to these stories are interesting because from the outside that's what it seems like.
Yeah.
It's like that some of this stuff, this behavior should not even it's not even a possibility of a way to conduct yourself in a professional environment. You
Right?
can't
I agree.
it can't even show up in your brain. Like what is happening,
Yeah, it's crazy.
But anyway, yeah.
Yep.
That's crazy, but sadly very frequent.
Mhm.
So
we need to call it out and to change it.
No, and it's great
Yep.
that it's getting much more visibility nowadays than it ever has, and it seems to just be increasing too. Like the visibility is just growing every year, and so that's great.
Which is good and not good because
Right.
wait,
Right.
there's more. There's
Right?
more
No,
harassment
totally,
and
totally, more and more, and also like
Why is this stopping?
whether there's actually justice that comes as a result of the visibility is another issue, right? Like just because there's visibility doesn't mean there's actually actionable change happening, but it's on the path. At least we're on the path towards it. Hopefully.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we'll end on that note, a very somber
Bum, bum,
note,
bum.
but that's okay. That's
No way.
Let's finish on, you know what? Making games is really cool. And oftentimes you work with awesome people. Everybody's passionate about their craft. This is what makes it worth it. And that's the reason why you see a lot of people staying in the game industry and making games. And it should just be like this. It can be hard, but it doesn't have to be extremely hard. It doesn't have to be painful. So let's just change it so that it's still hard but fun and not painful anymore, and so that everybody's invited.
It's challenging but not painful. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, thank you so much, Celia. If you would have told 2017 me as I was reading Gamer's Brain that one day we'd get to talk to you, I would have been just totally floored.
I'll tell you, Anthony,
so
like a month ago or whatever, when he first talked to you and you said you would come on the podcast, was like, guess who's coming on the podcast? And I was like, I had like no idea who even to get. Your name would have never even come to my mind as someone who there was a possibility of us talking to. So it's really exciting that you were able to come on here, and we appreciate it so much.
I'm very happy to talk to everyone, and thank you so much for having me. And it's always fun to have these conversations and to share our passion with people who just love to make games.
No, it's a pleasure. It seems like you have so many interesting things to say. I'm sure we could talk for hours. So I really appreciate it.
You seem surprised.
No surprise at all. I just
I'm kidding.
I'm so happy when we meet people and they're as interesting as I hope they would be.
Celia, where can people follow you or find out more about your the Ethical Games Initiative?
I have my website, celiahodent.com. I'm very active on Twitter. This is my favorite platform, Celia Hodent. I'm very usable. So it's Celia Hodent on everything.
Great branding, consistent.
Yeah, right? Keep it simple. And feel free to poke me on Twitter and just also can poke me on LinkedIn. Sometimes it takes me a while to answer because I'm sadly getting a lot of messages, and so it's hard to answer to everyone, but at some point I do answer. So feel free to ask me your questions.
Awesome. You're thank you so much for coming on, and it's been awesome. Been super fun conversation. We'll be slicing up all of these conversations for the different things we've talked about for everybody to hear. For those who are listening to us, you can find more information about our studio at koalaentertainment.com. There you have links to all our social media, including, most importantly, our Discord, which has an idle game with, honestly, Celia, terrible UX. Like we're working within the confines of Discord bot space, but
it's a process. It's okay.
It's a process. I can't wait to see where we're going to end up to one day on that game. But you can
Slash
join this
command
game
soon. Hopefully,
Yes,
that's at least a slight improvement.
Things things will get better. You can join our Discord, play that game. That game ties into the lore of our upcoming single-player physics FPS game called Agora, coming for Steam and Xbox for sure. Hope maybe other platforms. We'll see if that's a reality as we get further into development. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Until next time.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you.